you can do everything right in SEO, it doesn't guarantee that the LLMs recommend your brand. You might end up just being this, I mean, I'm saying just being the source, which is desirable for publishers and affiliates, but which is not desirable for a financial services business, which wants to be recommended. And this is maybe then also a good example for the very first question we talked about. Is it the same? What's the difference? And this is one of the examples where it's so obvious to me. Yes, there's a difference. And this might not be the case for every company that this happens, but it was one of the clearest examples I've seen where you can do everything right for SEO, but you need to look at it for LLMs with a different set of eyes, with a different mindset, and evaluate things a little bit differently.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the eMarketing Association. I also run Did It, a agency now that started out in the SEO business in 1996. So I've been in SEO and web visibility longer than Google has existed, which is part of why I'm super excited to be chatting with Malte Landwehr, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Peec AI, which really deals a lot with visibility within the LLMs. So not SEO so much as Generative Engine Optimization, or GEO. So thanks so much for joining me, Malte. And let's start first with the fact that people don't understand how visibility within an LLM chatbot is different than visibility within a 10-link search result. And how do you explain to folks that difference?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Usually I tell people, basically you already gave me half the answer, right? We in SEO, we come from a world where we have blue links ranking. And yes, sometimes there's a featured snippet or you're ranking with an image. But at the end of the day, it's all about ranking URLs. That is the level on which we operate. But if we look at a ChatGPT answer or Perplexity answer, it often suggests one or multiple entities. This can be brands, this can be products, this can be locations, countries, maybe if I'm in the vacation space. And a a brand or a product very, very obviously has completely different attributes than a URL, and I can optimize very, very different things. So to me, it is quite clear that these are two different worlds with two different kinds of results. Of course, there is an overlap, and we can dive into that a bit later. But to me, it's just a very, very different thing, the kind of answer I get. I would almost compare it more to I'm asking a human for a recommendation. Then that person would not tell me, read this blog article written by Kevin Lee, it's the best one. It would tell me, based on all the blog articles I've read in the last week, this is the best SEO conference, or this is the best car for you, or go buy this headset. And to me, that is very, very different from what Google and other web search engines are doing.
Yeah, that's a great point. When I chat with prospects and customers of Did It, I try to approach the whole generative engine visibility or GEO issue a little bit differently, both from the perspective of sort of what's the downside if you ignore it versus what's the upside if you invest in it. So, how would you categorize or help marketers quantify both the downside of not investing in GEO as well as the upside of doing a good job investing in GEO?
Yeah, I mean, the downside is people are already turning to LLMs, or rather, they are turning to LLM-based search and answer engines for, well, answers. So it is just reasonable that as a marketer, I want my product to show up there, I want my brand to show up there. How big the risk of not doing that is really depends on every brand, right? If we look at a brand where SEO is probably or has probably never been the number one priority, like Starbucks, for example, I don't think that they will have a huge problem if they underinvest in GEO, just like they didn't have a big problem underinvesting into SEO. By the way, if there's an SEO team at Starbucks, I'm not saying you're doing a bad job or anything. I'm just saying you are not the number one marketing team where the CEO cares about the numbers every day, right? It's not like a Skyscanner or an eBay where if the SEO numbers are bad, the whole executive team would become aware. But if you are a business where SEO has always been very important, then it is just logical that GEO will also become important. And so that is the underinvestment risk, right? Like the traffic shifts from SEO to GEO, and we can debate if it's right now 0.5% or 4%. But I think almost everybody expects it to be more next year than this year, and probably even more the year after. And I don't know if it will be a 30% market share, a 50% market share, or 100% market share. But what we need to keep in mind is even if the usage stays frozen, so no more people are leaving Google to use ChatGPT, then we still have to deal with the fact that there are AI overviews on maybe it's 20% of keywords, maybe 25, maybe 33%, depending on which tool or data source you trust. And we have AI mode, which is slowly becoming like maybe not becoming the default, but based on what I understand from talking to people at Google, elements of AI mode will come into the regular search results. So even within Google, we will have to deal more and more with these LLM written answers. So that also should help us to understand the risk of not investing at all is big. And then if we look at the opportunity, I think for brands that actually sell a product or a service that is outside of the internet, the opportunity is even bigger than SEO, because SEO was always a traffic acquisition channel. And then I still had to convert, still have to lead the person through the sales funnel. In a typical user journey, somebody would maybe do 50 clicks to different websites, land on my website 5 times, land on the website of one of my affiliate partners a couple of times. But now with an experience like ChatGPT or also AI mode or Perplexity, I can pull the whole user journey inside the chat. And as a brand, I have zero visibility. Like you can literally go to ChatGPT and say, I want to buy a bicycle. And then with questions and answers, you will learn actually what I need is a gravel bike. And then you can come to a point that you know which brand and then which product. And then the only thing you need to do outside of ChatGPT right now is the ordering. And actually, last week they announced something that could also change that. And we just have no visibility into that. So for brands that sell real services, real products, that can be huge. Problematic it is if you are a publisher or an affiliate, because then you only make money when people visit your website, and either you can run ads or you get commission on the click, like Skyscanner I mentioned earlier, or any kind of price comparison website. So or any news and media publisher, that most of them, almost all of them, make money running ads on their websites. And for them, this whole shift is a big problem, because even if they are mentioned and as visible as they used to be in Google now in ChatGPT, they are just way fewer clicks, because people already get the answer. They don't need to go to a website for a product comparison, for a flight comparison, for an airline comparison. You can get all of that inside the chat. And for these two types of business models, publisher and affiliate, and you could argue that affiliate is a subset of publisher, but let's not go down into that rabbit hole. This is a big challenge, and they need to figure out what their future business model is and how to survive in this world.
Yeah, that's a great point about zero-click search, which is something that freaks out sort of the traditional online-only marketer, actually ends up being a middle to upper funnel touch point, or an even a lower funnel touch point as well. But it really spans the entire funnel for brick and mortar companies and companies that are still in the offline world, right? Because you can arrive at your decision about that bicycle and then realize, oh, it's in stock at a place that's, you know, 2 miles or 5 kilometers from you, depending on where you are, right? And then you can say, oh, I'll just go and get it. And you may walk in that store and they have no idea that you spent, 20 minutes doing research with an LLM, a generative engine answer bot before you got there, and that you knew exactly
Yeah,
which model you wanted. As far as they're concerned, you just came in with a very strong preference
yeah.
of
You mentioned something very interesting that they don't know. I recently saw numbers from an SEO agency. According to their web analytics, 0% of their leads were from ChatGPT. And they asked themselves, can that be true? So they started to add a form. Everybody who wanted to be contacted by them had to type in where they found them. And it was 2% Perplexity and 21% ChatGPT. So I really think there are a lot of businesses who are already getting visitors and leads from ChatGPT, just because there is often no click happening, because ChatGPT often just recommends a brand. There's no link to click. This is like, I've started calling this dark chat, similar to dark social. There's a lot of unattributed traffic out there.
Yeah, which of course that translates back into that risk quantification that we were discussing earlier, right? We have to be careful as marketers not to exclusively use the clicks KPIs and the other on-site KPIs that we used to use as success metrics, and think more broadly about our businesses. One of the other things that I'd love your perspective on as it relates to understanding the probabilistic visibility of a brand or a service in a result is, we all anticipate that the LLMs are moving towards more personalization, right? So they know my preferences, they know your preferences, and it really is very, very different than the old ranking models, which were already broken, right? To be perfectly honest, all the ranking monitoring tools were wrong a lot of the time. Even Google Webmaster Tool was often wrong, or just gave a skewed result in relation to reality. So, where do you think personalization fits in from the perspective of changing how marketers should manage, content creation, content syndication, how they should think about visibility, probabilistic visibility within a generative engine?
Yeah, so unless we have some kind of browser plugin or an antivirus software on the operating system that scans everything, we cannot have perfect data like how the experience really is personalized for every customer. So I think we need to accept we will never know how it's personal. Like, no brand that you are buying something from will know perfectly what does ChatGPT actually know about you, what influenced it. I think there's still a case can be made that companies should track prompts and see what answers are given, just to give like an average answer, like which running shoe brand is recommended when I supply no additional information, no context. Or you can also add context directly in the prompts you're tracking, right? You can ask ChatGPT, I'm a 40-year-old man. I've never done sports in the last 20 years. I want to get running again. Which shoes should I buy? You will probably get something like On shoes or Skechers with like a sole that's like very big to be good on your knees. But if you say I'm an 18-year-old varsity athlete, I need running shoes for my next competition, you will probably be recommended a different brand. And depending on what kind of product you buy, just entering your age or your gender can already influence. I ran 2 tests recently. One was location-wise. I basically asked every single day, I mean, of course, not manually, I used the Peec AI software for that. Every single day, I asked ChatGPT, AI Mode, Perplexity, all of these LLMs, where to buy the best fried chicken. Apologies to everybody who are vegetarians. I always rethink, like, afterwards, I should have done like a non-meat option for this, because now I have to run around with this meat case study. But and depending on which city or which state in the United States I put in the prompt, I get vastly different results. Or a second test I'm running constantly is on headphones. I run the same 3 questions, like which headphone should I buy, recommend me headphones, and one other. But before, I always write a little persona description. So this is my name, my age, and I'm a gamer and I like first person games. Or I work from home and I do a lot of meetings and I want to switch between my phone and my laptop all the time. Or I'm a sport enthusiast, but I don't like the music in the gym, so I need headphones. Or I'm a commuter and I always want to look professional. Or I'm completely into audio and I'm into the gold wires and gold wire connectors and everything. And depending on what you write first, you are recommended completely different brands, completely. Like sometimes there's zero overlap in the top 5 brands over thousands of data points. And this just shows LLMs do understand context. And it's not so different whether you put the context in your prompt, or it was maybe in the history of your chat, or it's one of these pieces of information that the LLM has saved about you. So I think marketers who are into tracking prompts should definitely also add something like a persona and an ICP if they have that, just to understand for different personas how visible am I and what sentiment are the LLMs using when they describe my brand or when they mention my brand.
That's great advice. So for the regular SEO industry, the old school SEO industry, right? People always have a Google first mentality, and if we were to sort of look at query share currently, I would imagine that obviously ChatGPT is out there in front. Do you recommend that they have a similar sort of primary focus on best practices around ChatGPT visibility and then content syndication and content out there within the types of locations that ChatGPT really likes, Wikipedia and Reddit and the dozens of other data sources that Wikipedia that ChatGPT prefers, or do you recommend they go at it from a more general digital PR and content syndication perspective?
I would do something in between. So if we look at the pure LLM-based search and answer engines, definitely ChatGPT is the one that matters in the Western world, I have to say. If we are in Russia, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, you will see Qwen with much more market share. You will see DeepSeek with significant market share. But in Europe, in North America, it's ChatGPT. Um, yes, there's also Perplexity, but maybe you find one or two countries where it has 10% of the size of ChatGPT, but usually Perplexity is even smaller. You have a couple of markets like India where Grok is pretty big, but also like very few markets. So all in all, the other LLMs, they don't matter too much, I would say. Or actually not the LLMs, but the search and answer engines based around these LLMs, to be a bit more precise in the terminology. However, if we look at Google, I already mentioned the AI overviews. And it's probably very likely that in reality, AI overviews are the LLM with the biggest market share. Like, even if they are only appearing for 20% of prompts, I think 20% of searches on Google, even then, the biggest guess what is the search market share of ChatGPT is 10%. And many people will argue it's not 10%, it's less. So even then, AI overviews are probably coming up more often. Um, from my experience, I think people trust the ChatGPT answers more from the AI overviews. So this is based on my experience, the people I know, but also what I see people write on the internet. So it's arguable if which one has more impact. But these are the two that I would look at the most. And then, yes, I would look at the sources that they like the most, and I would try to publish my content there. But I would be careful with following these general best practices of Wikipedia, Reddit, YouTube. It is correct for many companies, but we have clients where the top two sources are Instagram and TikTok. And we have clients where the top sources are just so Wikipedia's in there, but then just university websites and non-profits and some governmental websites. Especially Perplexity sometimes really, really likes these university, NGO, governmental affiliated websites. So depending on your topic, it could be that actually Reddit, YouTube, Wikipedia are not the number one sources. So I always recommend people, if you want to do it very quick, just think of a couple of relevant prompts, put them in there, look at the sources. You might be surprised and you might see, oh, it's not always the big three. It's not always Reddit, YouTube, Wikipedia. But yeah, if you know nothing, starting with those three is not wrong and is likely to be correct. Um, and then there are also differences between the LLMs. So with ChatGPT, I often see that for I would say, topics where you could quote lots of different sources and where there's also a debate going on. Like, I don't know, is too much salt healthy or unhealthy? Is coffee healthy or not? Like these kinds of topics, where you find a lot of content on the internet claiming either one. It often goes with almost exclusively, like 18 out of the top 20 source domains are editorial websites. And if that is the case, of course, I need to get my content on there. And then digital PR is one good way to do it, but it's not the only way because, especially in the US, the UK, many newspapers nowadays have also a commercial content team in addition to the journalists. So if you see an article like um, the five best food delivery services, and you notice that all five of them are affiliate links, and the article is already 5 years old but still linked prominently, maybe you don't need to send a press release with the new feature in your food ordering app. Maybe you need to call the affiliate manager and give them a really good deal on your affiliate program. And you don't do it because you want the traffic from that article. You are doing it because that article is cited over and over again by LLMs, and giving them very good affiliate conditions might impact where you are ranked on that list and might convince that commercial writer to put your recommendation on number one. And I've seen a few people doing this and pull it off, and it can work. And in many cases, ChatGPT then changes their answer, or also AI overviews, also Perplexity. If you can change the content of the main source, you can almost immediately change the answer.
Yeah, it's so funny because we had an internal debate about branded content teams at publishers and how we weren't sure whether branded content would routinely have essentially the same weight within the LLM algorithms in comparison to what at least is purported to be pure editorial content. Of course, the lines are pretty blurry in many cases, but at least in the United States, the FTC likes for branded content to be appropriately tagged. And so we were, debating whether or not branded content could, at least for the intermediate period of time, be a really great entree into, content syndication or getting content out into the right places. Um, you know, you had mentioned earlier how publishers are struggling with the fact that zero-click search is horrible for them, but at the same time, their branded content team should probably be heavily promoting the fact that the content is still spidered by Google, the content is still spidered by the LLMs, and therefore, visibility it comes in different forms within branded content. So,
Yeah.
but we'll have to see whether or not the branded content ends up eventually being given a different ranking factor or a different probabilistic delta as it relates to the LLMs. But for now, I would agree with you that it seems to be ingested and given essentially similar weights to pure editorial.
Yeah. Even the purely bought articles, like where it's not even just an affiliate link, it's like you buy the whole article.
Yeah.
Even these advertorials that are very blatant, sometimes have even the name advertorial in the title, even those I still see quoted by the LLMs. But I agree, it just makes sense that at some point there's a product manager or an engineer at OpenAI who realizes, wait a minute, this is now the third podcast where Malte has mentioned that advertorials still work. Maybe I should do something about it. And probably when somebody more famous than me starts saying it, then they will notice. And yeah, I fully expect that there will be some form of penalty, or it will be disregarded. Um, One user already told me that they saw ChatGPT specifically say, according to a paid article on CNN, CNN is the brand I made up. It was a German publisher. Not sure if CNN even does paid articles. Um, but yeah, it did recognize that it's a paid article, but it still quoted it. So
Yeah.
probably the marketing team was still very happy with it.
For sure. Let's spend a bit of time educating the viewers and listeners on how queries and interactions with the answer engine are quite different than a typical single query in a Google or Bing. It seems that people are engaging with the answer bots much more interactively in layered, deeper dive type search behavior. And how does that impact people's content strategy? How does that impact their visibility monitoring?
Yeah. So with SEO, I do a search, and at least I can see that in Google Search Console that there's an impression, right? Like that's the least thing I can notice at a marketer. So if somebody does 3, 4, 5 searches, I should at least see 5 impressions if I always have the correct content and I'm ranking for it. And with ChatGPT or similar systems, I can start a deep research. And then maybe the machine is running for 30 minutes and conducts 200 searches for me and visits 300 websites. And then I just get a report in the end. And as a marketer, no person visited my website. I could show 0 banners unless I have very bad bot filtering. I could drop 0 retargeting cookies. None of my partners said, "Hey, I recognize this user. Do you want to retargeting with me?" Or "Can I enrich the data profile you have about this person?" And I didn't get any information at which company the person worked who visited my website. So I'm essentially blind. And even with regular usage of LLMs, people ask a question, they get an answer, they ask a follow-up question, they get another answer. So and for each of these potentially external documents have been pulled in. But I don't get a user journey, right? I don't get people to visit my website. And in the past, for content creation, what you could do is you could create, in year 1, you create 100 blog articles, 100 help center articles, 5 YouTube videos, 200 social media posts. At the end of the year, you sit down and you look at how often was each of these read, how many customer journeys did it touch, to how many sales did it lead, either directly or indirectly. And then you can say, okay, apparently half of our help center articles had 0 visitors. Maybe we invest a little bit into help center articles. But all the interviews we had in the blog, they had a lot of views. We should do more interviews. And this way you can update your content strategy, right? And you can also go to the CFO and say, hey, I need to hire 3 more writers and 1 more designers because our infographics in the blog article bring us a lot of customers, a lot of viewers, readers, and these convert into customers. But with an LLM, what do you get? Like all of this is done by the LLM for the user. You don't know how many people visited your blog article. You don't know how many answers were generated by the LLM quoting a specific blog article, a specific help center article. And right now, you still get this information to a degree because ChatGPT still sends this GPT user bot to fetch the website. But it's only a question of time until they will do more and more caching, and then they will visit each one maximum once per day, unless it's like data that updates constantly. So you will get very, very little information. And in the past, it was easy to understand based on your web analytics how many people did you reach with your content. But now you need to somehow find out how many tokens were generated in LLMs taking your content into account. And you really don't know. You don't know perfectly. This is where I think prompt tracking can be one of the things you should do. I already mentioned the user agents, which you can see in your log file. And then prompt tracking would be the second thing, just to understand where is my brand actually mentioned, when is my own content being cited, or if I publish more of my own content, does it actually influence the answer? I recently talked to one of I think it's a Fortune 100 company, definitely Fortune 500. No, actually, I'm very sure they are also Fortune 100. And there they have an employee, and whenever people publish content, they ask him, "Hey, I published 3 articles last week. How often were they cited by the LLMs? How often? Tell me." And then he has to send them the number, how often they were cited. And this is already how some people who create content measure their own success and try to document their own impact that they have, because that is a company that realized our visibility in these systems is really, really important. and they have people from like 10 different teams working on this topic, and each of them always wants to know, like, I don't know, my automatic generated product pages, how often were they cited? Send me a report. So there are people already who deeply care about this and want to know how often they were cited.
Yeah, that brings me to, obviously everybody wants to come up with KPIs that can be in visibility reports and be able to tell the folks managing the P&L or managing the senior level marketing mix, right? How important certain things, and also to pat themselves on the back when they're successful. But in the same way that, not all clicks are created equal in website visitors, because some are not within the ICP or they're not actually in the target audience of a buyer or a prospect, the same situation is happening within, ChatGPT related searches and ChatGPT related visibility. So how do you recommend that marketers adapt what they're doing within that Fortune 100 company, for example, not to just purely look at citation rates, for example, which could mean that kindergartners doing research are looking at your content a lot, which really doesn't move the needle, right? Versus people who are in the ICP engaging. How do you recommend that they sort of modify their thinking around understanding visibility against who matters versus general visibility?
Yeah, I think there are two things to do. So one is, in your web analytics, create like a custom audience and put in a very, very long regular expression with chat.openai.com or chatgpt.com or bart.google.com or all of the LLMs. And you also need to include all of the previous hosts and the ones they're using now. And then you can have the segment. If somebody actually clicks in the LLM, which is a very small amount of people, but if they actually click in the LLM, what is the conversion rate? And there, like, actually, how many clicks do I get? What's the conversion rate? How much money do I make in the end? And you will probably have very little traffic in comparison to SEO, but you might be surprised by the conversion rates. I've seen numbers where it's the same, even numbers where it's less than the SEO traffic, but that I believe is because of a bad content strategy. But I've also seen numbers of 6 times higher than SEO, 8 times higher. I think 23 times higher than SEO was the highest one. So this traffic is very well converting. So in your web analytics, look at revenue or leads or whatever is your metric from LLM traffic. If you're an affiliate publisher, maybe don't do it because you will be quite sad. But if you are like a B2B company, SaaS company, services, these conversion rates will make you happy. For many other business models, because the traffic level is so low, it will just not be relevant in comparison to your SEO traffic if you're doing SEO correctly. And then I recommend prompt tracking, like define a set of prompts that are relevant for you and run them ideally every day against different models, and then look at aggregated data. That's very important. It's almost always a waste of time to look at the chat reply that you had Sunday last week for one specific prompt, because there is a randomness in these answers, and you will always want to look at a large data set. You always want to look at 10 answers, 100 answers, maybe 10,000 answers. If you look at 10,000 answers, do it for multiple prompts. Don't run the same prompt 10,000 times. You will probably hit some caching at some point. And then look at visibility. So how often was my brand mentioned? That is per prompt. It's either 0% or 100 per chat. It's either 0% or 100%. But if you do it for 1,000, 10,000, you can get really like interesting percentages. Do the same for your competitors. And that can already be your benchmark, right? Like, don't go in blindly and say my goal is 100% visibility. That is just, it's not realistic. It's like, I want to be number one for all of my keywords. You can have this as you like the big audacious goal out there, but it's not realistic, and you uh, shouldn't have that as an expectation. But you can benchmark yourself against your competitors, and you should have the goal to be at least as visible versus your competitors as you are in Google. Ideally better, because it's early and you can still capture market share. If you want to go a little bit more structured, like if you work at a really large company, need to come up with elaborate models, I would always try to look at TAM. So what's the total addressable market? With Google, we have search volume. With LLMs, we can estimate the prompt volume to a certain degree, but it's a bit difficult because most prompts are unique. And if you did the exact prompt and looked at the search volume, only thank you, hello, and try again would have very high search volume, because you and I might ask the same question differently. You might leave out the question mark. I might write 3 question marks in the end because I'm asking the question not for the first time. So on a like string and character level, these prompts are often very unique. And then a second thing is some form of like demand capture mechanism, which in LLMs is probably my brand is mentioned, right? And then you can put it in context. In SEO, we had the organic ranking. Now in ChatGPT, we want the brand mentioned. And so this way you can put it in context and then measure that, right? That would be this visibility. And then you can think, of course, about all kinds of metrics. You can, for example, look at average rank. Like if my brand is mentioned, is it the first or the last mentioned brand? But be careful, because if your prompt is, please list the 10 worst cars ever built, you probably don't want to be number one on that list. Or ChatGPT sometimes has the style where it gives a list of options and then has like a summary in the end. So that's why I recommend this. Like especially GPT like 3.5 used to do this all the time. So there, it's probably not about being the number one mentioned brand, but the brand mentioned in the last
The
box or the brand
summary.
mentioned most often. So maybe just stick with visibility. Um, and then sentiment can be very interesting. Like, is your brand mentioned in a positive or negative context? And also, this I would always benchmark versus the competition, because there are usually fields where an LLM is always positive about every player in the market, or a field where it's always negative. It always mentions like some form of negativity. Like, I don't know, if you ask ChatGPT what's the coolest cigarette to smoke, I'm pretty sure, unless you are very precise in your prompt, there will be some kind of disclaimers and warnings, especially if you say something like, as a teenager, what's the coolest brand to smoke? You will probably have negative sentiment associated with any entity that is mentioned. So always look at sentiment relative to the competition. And then I personally like to look at citation share. So out of all the citations or sources, how many are from my own website or from assets that I control, like my YouTube channel, my LinkedIn Pulse articles, my Reddit threads in my own subreddit. And another interesting one is citation coverage. So look at the top 10, top 20, top 100 URLs that are being cited and check, is your brand mentioned there or not? And if you can bring that value up, very likely your visibility will go up. And when I talk about KPIs and metrics, I always like to make sure what are leading metrics and what are lagging metrics. Because many SEOs make this mistake of only using traffic to for everything or visibility. But it's a lagging metric, right? Like your SEO performance of this week does not depend on the work you did last week. It depends on the work you did the last 2 years. And I've very, very often encountered companies where if this week the traffic drops, the CEO comes in and said, you have to change what you're doing. Whatever you did last week is wrong. You started writing blog articles. We stopped that. Apparently it's bad. When in reality, you should have some leading metrics like number of articles published per week, number of errors reported in Google Search Console, number of internal links going to 404 pages. Maybe it's Core Web Vitals, like whatever you believe in as an SEO. And I don't want to tell anybody what the best leading metrics are. I know people have different opinions, but have a set of these leading metrics in SEO and also in GEO or AEO, if you want to call it answer engine optimization. So something like a source coverage or a citation share, these are good leading metrics, and you can improve every day, every week, and can measure your progress. And something like visibility might have a little bit of a delay, but I think these are good metrics to see that you are making progress.
Yeah, what I like about the citation related KPIs is it also dovetails in well across the startup through the enterprise, right? Because an enterprise is used to having a lot of SEO power. You know, when they publish something on their domain, it tends to rank because they've got a lot of authority that's been built up over many years. Startup doesn't have that luxury, but the startup does have a lot of tools at their disposal, within content sources that are still either directly under their control or at least they have influence over, right, through their digital PR or branded content teams, right? And so by using citations, I feel like that's a great, those numbers apply really well to startups and early stage companies as well as enterprise companies because um, they're directly manifested from the investment they've made into content creation, content syndication, and participation in social, etc.
Yeah, I fully agree. Startups are often more nimble, so can maybe also go after more, I don't know, sketchy sources or sources where the enterprise would say, "Ooh, we have to run a brand safety audit," whereas the startup can just go in, like, right? Like as a startup founder, you can just go to a subreddit and say, "Yeah, I'm doing an ask me anything," right? And or you can start, I don't know, a Medium blog or can write a LinkedIn Pulse article, like whatever is the source that the LLMs like for that topic. And as a startup, as an enterprise, this is a multi-month process where you need to write a pitch deck, pitch it internally to a couple of people, get buy-in, potentially form a tiger team, and then do it for 3 months and then report back on it. And then only if the reporting is positive, then you're allowed to roll it out to all the markets. So yes, definitely. Like both kinds of companies should abuse the power that they have, right? The startup has to capitalize on the fact that they can be nimble, and the enterprise has to use their brand authority and potentially also their budgets, because as a large enterprise, I can just go and pay the 10 largest YouTube influencers in the world that are relevant for my topic. Please create a video about me. As a startup, I have to be very well funded to do the same movement.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, what else should we have covered that we didn't cover as a sort of a final wrap-up question?
I can share one story maybe from a client of ours that also shows where GEO and SEO are a bit different. So this is a company that did everything right in SEO. They have top Google rankings. They are arguably one of the top 3 companies in their segment. And they had a couple of prompts in Perplexity where their visibility was 0, but they were the #1 source for these prompts. And usually we don't do consulting, right? Like we're a software company, but there was this like, is something wrong with your software question behind it. So we looked into it, and what we saw is they wrote an article that says, look, we are not the right partner for everyone. And if for whatever reason you don't want to work with us or we declined you, here's a list of 4 competitors that are active in the same market that we trust and have trusted for the last 10 years. And it's a financial service business that is available in a couple of states in the US. I don't want to go into more details. And this article was always cited by Perplexity. It was the most cited source in the whole dataset. And these 4 competitors were always recommended by Perplexity. So what did they do? They reworded it a little bit, put themselves on #1 in the list, and 48 hours later, they are in the top 2 always. And if when we look back at it a month later, they had become the #1 brand. They had jumped from 0 visibility to something like 20% visibility, and there was no brand above that. Like because there's so many competitors, they were not always visible, but they were the most visible brand in the data set for the prompts they had defined. And I think this shows quite clearly that you can do everything right in SEO. It doesn't guarantee that the LLMs recommend your brand. You might end up just being this, I mean, I'm saying just being the source, which is desirable for publishers and affiliates, but which is not desirable for a financial services business, which wants to be recommended. And this is maybe then also a good example for the very first question we talked about. Is it the same? What's the difference? And this is one of the examples where it's so obvious to me. Yes, there's a difference. And this might not be the case for every company that this happens, but it was one of the clearest examples I've seen where you can do everything right for SEO, but you need to look at it for LLMs with a different set of eyes, with a different mindset, and evaluate things a little bit differently.
Great. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. If folks want to reach out to you, is LinkedIn the best place to find you?
Yes. If you want to reach out to me, just follow me on LinkedIn or connect or write me a message. And if you want to see the software that I'm helping to build, just go to peec.ai, peec.ai, and we offer a free trial, or you can talk to one of my colleagues in the sales team.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for joining me. Lots of great stuff.
Thanks for inviting me.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.